landscape that we tend to forget that anything else is actually happening in the world. However, our actions certainly have repercussions, especially in the world of global investments. For South Africa to remain competitive, we need to make sure our country is a go-to destination for foreign direct investment. To talk more about this, I'm joined by Azad Zangana, who is an economist at global asset manager Schroders. Good to have you, Azad. Thank you very much for being our guest.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
So last year we had Keith Wade from your organisation who said that the global economy was in a Goldilocks stage, meaning it's now too hot or cold. You don't really know. Where are we at now? How are things looking?
Actually, since last year, the economy has been heating up quite nicely. It looks like we're now moving away from this Goldilocks phase and looking at sort of the expansion phase of the economic cycle. That means growth running above trend, inflation picking up, but also it means that central banks are having to start to raise interest rates. And of course, this is providing a bit of a challenge for financial markets.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a new president coming in. Our new president, of course, was on a charm offensive of late, particularly when he was at the World Economic Forum. I think that did a lot for the reputation of South Africa. But that was what we were hearing at home. How is it looking on an investment point of view? Are we getting investments back into South Africa after, I think, a rather rocky patch?
Absolutely. I think the rebound in the South African rand is testament to the appetite of international investors to be invested back in South Africa. The market in South Africa has been attractive for quite some time now. The only thing that was holding everybody back was the political instability and the change in regime. Now that things are settling down, and I mean, it is early days, but as they are settling down, capital is slowly coming back into South Africa once again.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at our GDP, we've unexpectedly seen this growth of 3.1% in the last quarter of 2017. The attributing factors was the growth in agriculture, the growth in forestry and the fishing industry. But the most important sector is mining, and we saw that going down 4.4%. Give us a little bit more of a perspective as to the different sectors and how they're contributing.
I think, these can be quite challenging times for some of the resource and industrial sectors more generally. And it's not necessarily a story that's limited to South Africa. Obviously, at the moment, there are concerns around global trade wars happening now, with the US implementing, about to implement tariffs on steel and aluminium, and that seems to be impacting miners and resources everywhere in the world. But I think if the situation doesn't turn out to be as bad as possible, then we could see a rebound there.
Yeah. I want to turn our attention to something that I think has got a lot of people worried, and perhaps investors, and maybe you can shed some light on this. The issue of land grab. This is something that people are talking about, and I would like to know from the foreign investment point of view, how is this hurting us? Is it hurting us at all? Are investors worried by, this impending legislation that may or may not, we still don't know what it's going to look like, but, the talk of land grab generally does scare people. Can you give us a little bit of perspective on that?
It's not something that economists are very good at commenting on, but I can say that international investors are certainly keeping an eye on the situation. It would potentially set a tone for Ramaphosa's path over the next few years. Ideally, I think investors would like to see a free market working to allocate these type of resources, but I fully understand that this is a local issue and one that has to be resolved internally to put things right for a lot of people.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's not necessarily at this stage having an adverse effect on our economy. I mean, obviously nothing's been implemented, but I'm talking foreign investment and reputational damage, if at all it is. I mean, perhaps you can give us that perspective.
It's not an international sort of story at this moment in time. I think most investors are focused on the underlying economy, the pickup in business activity more generally, the value being offered by South African companies and the rand more generally. It's not that much of a concern at this stage.
At this stage, because obviously, as you mentioned earlier, it's an internal issue that still needs to be resolved and sorted through. Rating agencies, I mean, that was the buzzword for the last couple of years, where we were just convinced, you know, that they saw us in the worst light possible, which, you know, was reflecting in their status that they were putting us under and the pressure that came from them. What are they saying now? I mean, obviously, I know Eskom is a big problem and they have spoken out on that, but as a country in general?
Well, I think the moves with the budget, I think, is going to help quite a bit. Tightening of fiscal policy will certainly improve the moods from the rating agencies. And if there are sort of bigger structural changes to the economy that can help lift trend growth or medium-term growth, then I think that will also be very favourable there. But it looks to me that with the change in government and the change in leadership, we should be seeing an end to sort of downgrades from the rating agencies going forward.
And certainly on a final closing note, the new faces in the respective departments. I mean, I think our finance minister carries with him a lot of respect. We've also got Pravin Gordhan looking at state-owned enterprises. Again, somebody that carries a lot of respect, particularly with international investors. I mean, this, I imagine, can only help us very favourably with the reputation and investment.
Absolutely. Familiar faces are always great for investors, and those reappointments are very important to securing the confidence of international investors. But I think it's quite important to mention that it will also be the actions going forward. You know, how friendly will they be to international investors? Will there be new regulations or not? These are still big questions to be answered.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot to still be seen, and a lot's been spoken about, a lot's been done in terms of changes. But as Azad Zangana, our economist at global asset manager Schroders, tells us, you know, we need to see some action. And once the action starts, then I imagine international investors will have a better perspective. So there we have it. Let's wrap that up. And we're going to take a break. When we return, this is an interesting story. Survivors of gender-based violence have been honoured in a graduation ceremony in Johannesburg for their courage and a lot more. Do stay tuned for that interview.